Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede, and welcome to Facing South Florida. Well, it looks like the National Rifle Association and their Florida lobbyist, Marion Hammer, are up to their old tricks after the election. We'll talk to the incoming Agriculture Commissioner, Nikki Fried, about the NRA's blatant attempt to limit her power. But first, the White House released an extraordinary report documenting how climate change has already had devastating impacts on our health and economy, and that it could cost hundreds of billions of dollars by the end of the century. Despite the seriousness of the report, known as the National Climate Assessment, the White House tried to bury it by releasing it on Black Friday. And when the president was asked about the report issued by his own federal agencies, this is what he had to say.
Yeah, I don't believe it. No, I don't believe it. And here's the other thing. You're going to have China and Japan and all of Asia and all of these other countries, addresses our country. Right now, we're at the cleanest we've ever been, and that's very important to me. But if we're clean, but every other place on earth is dirty, that's not so good. So I want clean air, I want clean water, very important.
The president's views notwithstanding, I sat down with Dr. Ben Kirtman from the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science to discuss the significance of the report. Dr. Kirtman, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, take a step back. Give me the big picture. What do we need to know in this report overall for the world itself?
Well, I think this report underlines a couple of really important concepts. One, we know that the climate system has warmed since the 1950s, and we know that's primarily due to human activities. This report goes many steps further in the sense that it highlights what the economic impacts would be if we don't act. So the cost of inaction, if you will. And that's the first time that we've really dug into the cost of inaction. And that's an important part of this response in terms of adaptation and mitigation. The report also digs into, here I said the climate system has warmed since the 1950s. We know that's due to human activities. But then the question is, what are the impacts locally? What are the impacts in the Southeast? What are they in Florida, California? And so the report starts to dig into those elements. Now, I would say that, despite the fact that the report had these regional foci, I do think, this Southeast region is big. And I would argue that Florida needs its own climate assessment. There's a lot of heterogeneity in Florida. The South is very different than the middle part of the state versus the north part of the state, East Coast versus West Coast. Climate change impacts are very different across the state, and I think the state of Florida should look at that too.
Is anyone doing that type of work?
At the moment, that's not happening, and that's happened in other states. California had its own climate assessment. Other states are starting.
Who led the way on that? Was that the state government, or was that universities, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that was a partnership between the state government and the academic community, really pushing that needed to be done. And the same thing is sort of percolating in Florida. There's a group called the Florida Climate Institute that's trying to push this concept.
So if we wanted to actually understand the impacts in Florida, that would be something we could do now to actually get a better handle and get more information.
Absolutely. So that current assessment report, as good as it is, it doesn't have enough granularity for, Jim Murley in Miami-Dade County to figure out how to plan for climate change over the next 5 or 10 years. We need much more granularity, much more fine structure into what we're going to see in terms of sea level rise, what we're going to see in terms of temperature, what we might see in terms of rainfall.
All right. Well, but we've got this report now, so let's look at this 1,600-page report and what do we glean from it for Florida? Well,
one of the things that stood out to me in that report is warm nights. So we're seeing a big transition in the number of nights where it's over 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And, at first you kind of think, oh, what's the big deal about warm nights? But actually it is a big deal. Those are nights where you can no longer open your windows. You have to use your air conditioner the entire night. Think about that positive feedback to climate change, right? So now you're air conditioning 24/7 instead of maybe turning things off at night or not using quite as much air conditioning. Communities that don't have as much access to air conditioning or too expensive for them to run it overnight, are now being severely challenged by the heat. The other part is it has a big impact on agriculture. So the number of warm nights is expected to increase by over 50%. That's a huge demand.
Over what period of time?
Over the next 100 years, up to the end of the 21st century. That's an enormous impact, economic impact. That's going to cost a lot in terms of energy consumption. That's going to have a big effect on agricultural usage. It has a relatively large effect on the distribution of mosquitoes and all kinds of things. So something that seems rather innocuous, like warm nights, that change is really going to turn out to be important.
So you talk about obviously warming nights. That also leads to warmer waters.
Yes.
And that leads to more intense hurricanes. Is that why we're seeing, you believe, more hurricanes and stronger storms?
Yeah, so the science behind why warmer waters would make for warmer hurricanes is probably pretty solid, in the sense that as you have warmer waters, the warm water is the fuel for the hurricanes. If you warm up the water, you have more fuel, so you have more intense hurricanes. There's a lot of evidence that Harvey, that had that tremendous rainfall associated with Harvey, that was due to the fact that the Gulf of Mexico has warmed up quite a bit since the middle of the 19th century. You're seeing sort of the same kind of thing in the distribution in Atlantic hurricanes. There's a tendency for more Category 4 and 5 storms. The lower intensity storms are perhaps not being affected. So we are seeing some evidence of that. It's still, we need more data in order to verify that. However, when we look to the future, what we're seeing in the next 50 years, the next 100 years, all of the evidence from the numerical simulations that we do with climate models are indicating that we really will expect a big increase in the number of Category 5 and 4 and 5 storms.
How much of this, though, the counter-argument is this is cyclical? You know, we go through periods of increase, just on the issue of hurricanes, we go on cycles of increased hurricanes, then they diminish, then they come up again, and we're just in a cycle.
Sure, and that's part of it, and that's why it's a little bit hard to say that we're necessarily seeing that already. There's a lot of indications that we are sort of seeing that, but we just don't have enough data. What we do know is that if we continue on the same trajectory that we're on, we will reach the point where that signal from the warm waters, that signal from the CO2, will overwhelm those natural cycles that you talk about, and we will definitively see more Category 5 and 4 and 5 storms that are due to human activities.
You know, you mentioned it before, but even the issues of increased insects, mosquitoes.
Yes.
So you're going to see a larger rise in issues like Zika then becoming spread.
Absolutely, and that was actually commented on the report. We expect more and more vector-borne diseases. Those are insect-borne diseases. We expect a lot more of that as we move forward in the future. When you're no longer killing off the bugs in the winter, and it's warmer, and there's more stagnant water. Warmer water, stagnant water, more vector-borne diseases, and we're certainly already seeing that, and we expect to see more of that in the future.
You know, before I introduced you, obviously we played a clip from Donald Trump talking about how he doesn't believe the report. He was pressed on this by the Washington Post, and he said one of the problems that a lot of people like myself, we have very high levels of intelligence, but we're not necessarily such believers. And he goes on to talk about how the oceans are small, and oceans are very small, and it blows over. It was a very odd statement by the president, but what does it do when the President of the United States casts doubt on the science in terms of being able to address the problem?
Well, you know, as scientists, certainly it's a little bit disheartening, but we just keep plugging along. We know the scientific facts will win out. We know the best available science will eventually. You know, the way there's basically 1/3 of the population that has accepted the science of climate change. There's a middle third of the population that sees a fire hose of information, and they have a debate and they're not sure. It's my job to make sure we reach out to that middle third and make sure they have the best available science. They can make up their own minds. And then there's probably another third of the population that no matter what we say, we're not going to convince them. And I suspect that the president falls in that third that I'll never be able to convince.
I saw somebody on a network, a conservative, try to make the argument that essentially the climate science is a sham in its own sense because it's like a profit-making center. Like, folks, it keeps you employed. That somehow folks like yourself who study it are financially benefiting from this because there are endowed chairs now, and it gives you something to look at and keeps you employed, and that somehow that's it. I find that insulting. I'm just curious as to how you find it.
Well, it's not true. Let me put it that way.
There's not big money in it for you?
There's no big money in it for me. My grant proposals are very critically reviewed. I have to produce the best science possible. Some of my research is about climate change. A lot of my research isn't about climate change. So it's just absolutely not true. There's no profit margin. I don't get paid as a consultant. There's just no. In fact, I would be quite happy if the climate weren't changing. I would be quite happy to work on a different problem. So I totally dispute that point.
So I don't know if the next question I'm going to ask will end us on a high or on a bad note.
Sure.
Have we reached the tipping point? Have we reached a point where there really isn't a lot that can be done to pull us back from this brink? Not quite,
but we're getting very close. We're getting very close. Right now, we're at that point where we have to decide to act. If we start instituting major reductions in greenhouse gases and methane too, then we will be able to stabilize the climate perhaps below 2 degrees increase. But that has to start right now. And there are states in the United States that are aggressively seeking those targets.
But one of the arguments is that even if the United States is doing it, you have countries like China, India, which are still major producers that are going to continue to, and so therefore what we're doing is not going to have a dramatic effect.
I understand that argument, but you need to lead. And the United States has been a leader in climate issues a number of times. The Montreal Protocol for CFC reductions to remove the ozone hole problem. This is an opportunity for the United States to take a leadership role, and the rest of the world will follow.
Dr. Kurtman, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Up next, Nikki Fried hasn't even been sworn in yet as the state's new agriculture commissioner, and she's already in a fight with the NRA. We'll have that and more from her when we come back.